SeatGeek is the official sponsor of the Snake Sports Talk Show, with hundreds of events listed, live concerts, sporting events, and so much more. Go on to SeatGeek.com, enter promo code Snake Sports Talk Show, and save yourself $20 off your first.
Live from Las Vegas, the Snake Sports Talk Show with Jake Silva starts right now.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are at it again on the Snake Sports Talk Show live in Las Vegas, wherever and however you may be watching and listening. Your host, Jake Snake Silva, iHeartRadio, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch, and Instagram. Those are the social medias to like, follow, and subscribe, and hit the bell button for all latest notifications to keep you up to date on future and past shows. So, chapter in the NFL has officially closed, and we finally have ourselves a champion. XFL has officially begun. So, spring football amongst us this weekend, and of course, further and beyond. And a lot of people, they all have thoughts about spring football. But to me, I'm like, it's always fun because you always find those quote unquote diamonds in the roughs. And so holding, holding spring football like the XFL, even for the USFL, it's always fun to really experience and really just kind of get a gist of what it's all about. So got a great interview lineup here with us today. Tony Cordasco of Locked On Vegas Golden Knights is joining me here. Nice to have at least a Vegas local, big time name joining us here up on the show. So I'm really excited about that, getting a chance to talk about the Golden Knights, Stanley Cup playoffs, and so much more. All right, so I want to start with this. So first of all, congratulations to the Kansas City Chiefs. They've won now their second Super Bowl in the span of the 5 years that Andy Reid and Patrick Mahomes have been this combined duo. What does this mean now for the rest of the NFL? Well, here's the one thing that you obviously got to look at is that the Chiefs, we know we're building together something special. That's a clear coat. Nobody could ever change the narrative or explain best about what the Chiefs are and what they've become since Andy Reid took the job. And again, they've made the playoffs. And one of my big things about the Chiefs is, shout out to David Burns from Cedar Hill, Texas. Good to have you tuning in with us here on the show. One of the big things about it is that Andy Reid is such a terrific play caller. And he knows how to design playbooks. The only thing that Andy Reid needed was just that superstar quarterback. And then it changed everything. Now, remember, Andy Reid formerly coached the Philadelphia Eagles, built a culture. And think about it, Brian Westbrook, Donovan McNabb, Terrell Owens at one point, Brian Dawkins. There were so many really good Philadelphia Eagles players. And by the way, Philadelphia has always had a culture. They were the kind that they're very, very harsh, but they're also ones that are very passionate. So you can't afford to underperform in a city like Philadelphia because news media, fan bases will all tear you to shreds if that's the case. We saw this with Ben Simmons. We saw this with several other players. We even saw this during the time when they had Doug Peterson and in comes Nick Sirianni, and now he's just the next big thing for Philadelphia. But Kansas City, we all know they won their first Super Bowl in Super Bowl IV. But since then, it took them 50 years to then win the next Super Bowl. But Patrick Mahomes is just as great as anybody could ever explain it. Fastest one to the highest amount of touchdown passes, not to mention less amount of picks, most passing yards, and to a lot of the credits from Tom Brady and Peyton Manning and several other quarterbacks who have played this game. Is it developing into a dynasty? I don't know that yet until they've won their third title. Because if this is the case, they have been to 5 AFC championship games since Patrick Mahomes has been a starting quarterback. And they've won 2 Super Bowls in that 5-year span. But my one big thing is because if it's going to be one more title that they earn, then I can consider potentially a dynasty. It's the 3rd championship now in Kansas City's Chiefs history. And what makes it really interesting is that the fact of Kansas City, it's a great town, lots and lots of barbecuing, and they're very big on their football. Plus, too, I mean, you even talk about baseball. St. Louis and Kansas City do not like each other. On that I-70, it's big on rivalries. I mean, you can even consider the fact of like, the St. Louis Blues. Like when it comes to hockey, everybody's all big on the Blues. So it's a big sports town. And Kansas City, we all know in the AFC, amongst all the other AFC teams that have been coming and going, and that has been the Bengals, the Chargers, um, the Titans, several teams that have been competing in this conference. We know that the biggest thing is that you got to consider every part of your offense and defense and the entirety of the team and franchise all around you. And Kansas City built it beautifully. They may not have a fantastic defense, but they have guys that can play really good situationally. Frank Clark, L'Jarius Sneed. I thought even, Trent McDuffie was even going to be one guy that was going to be at some point a promising corner. I think he will be. And, Nick Bolton, really good linebacker, really can see everything that's up and in front of him. And I honestly think that Kansas City, I mean, they'll be dominant. As long as Andy Reid is the head coach and as long as Patrick Mahomes is the quarterback, that is what you need. But we know a lot of people say, well, you need defense to shut down games. That is absolutely true. But sometimes you got to have a mixed balance between defense and offense. And even if the defense may not be great, Kansas City just finds ways to win. And granted, I know what a lot of people are saying because of what happened with Philadelphia and what happened, with as far as the call and the flow of the game. I thought the game was great. It was great all the way up until that end. But remember this too. It still did not account for the blown coverages that Philadelphia gave up twice in the red zone. I know a lot of people are irate about the hold and the blown call and all the rest of it, and that was the worst way to end it. I know. But in the end, a lot of us have to fight through adversities. Certain plays may not be called. Certain plays may end up changing and turning the table, which everybody just believes it to be like it's scripted and all the rest of it. And some may still believe it is, but I know the NFL. I also know how football is played because injuries and all the rest of them are a real thing. I've played it and I've experienced that. And it'll be interesting though. But it will be something that I think down the road they're gonna have changes as far as reviews and officiating and all the rest of it. Because I know a lot of people, and I mean, hell, they even talked about how great that like the ratings got for the XFL. I mean, spring football being back up, and plus two, the officiating from there. There were several different challenges. There were several different replays. Everybody has all been banging on the NFL's door of we need to change this. We need to change that. If you're watching the XFL, look at what they're doing a little differently. Well, this is a funny thing. The NFL does, in fact, implement some things to the XFL that we're not even used to seeing. So, and maybe this is what builds a lot of clarity. That's why I'm in for it for spring football because it brings a lot of clarity in a lot of places. And the NFL is absolutely king when it comes to ratings, when it comes to popularity, when it comes to big brands, and at the same time, looking for ways to adjust and to be better. I'm not looking for this game to honestly get softer because I know hard hits are a big deal, all the rest of it. But that is all the adjustments that the NFL has to make. But my point exactly for Kansas City is going to be competitive for years to come. And we know a lot of teams in the AFC obviously have them on their radar. They're under their like they are on their sights. And that is where the AFC has a ton of competition in front of them. So congratulations to the Chiefs. I honestly thought it was a decent Super Bowl. And I knew the game was going to go over. It was like the over under was 50. And in the end, it got over close to 70. So I was very happy of it. I knew the game was going to end up going over, even if I didn't get the pick right. But it was going to be one of those games. They're going to be trading blows back and forth. But I will say this, I give a lot of credit to Philadelphia, not to mention Jalen Hurts and to a lot of the players on this roster. I mean, Howie Roseman put together a great roster, but in the end, the corners and a lot of their defensive players all got tested. That offensive line for Kansas City had gotten better. I think Creed Humphrey's a very underrated center, and a lot of those guys that are up there up on the front, hell, they had third string guys who were playing on the line, and they still managed to not allow a sack, allow a whole ton of pressures to Patrick Mahomes, and Mahomes is just great at what he does. So I give credit to Philadelphia for that. But I do want to shed light on this because I think now after watching Jalen Hurts in that Super Bowl, I think we can finally come to that discussion that we found a sixth quarterback amongst the five that we originally had that I'm not picking the phone up for when it comes to a potential trade or deal. I think Jalen Hurts has earned that spot because every week he just continuously gets better at his craft. And the funny thing about Jalen Hurts' history is that he's a great kid that had a lot of adversity thrown his way. People doubted him. People doubted his size. People doubted, his skill set, whether or not that he'd be successful in the NFL. He was a second round draft pick, and they already had a quarterback in Carson Wentz. But they wanted to experiment it in a very, very different way. But Jalen Hurts, I thought, played a really, really great Super Bowl. And he took a lot of those challenges. I mean, did you see that throw between him and Devontae Smith? Like, you can't tell me that Jalen Hurts would never be able to make that throw again. I mean, that was amazing. And it told you too, like how competitive that Super Bowl really became. So I am really excited for what next year may be. There's going to be some more adversity is going to be thrown Philadelphia's way, but Nick Sirianni is there to stay as a head coach. Every single one of us, we all thought, I don't know how this is going to work with Sirianni, but he had a great staff. I mean, Shane Steichen, he's now in Indianapolis, and you got Jonathan Gannon, who's the next Arizona head coach. I would have preferably gone with Brian Flores, but he took the defensive coordinating job with Minnesota, and that's a great job too. But he had a great staff. The offense was playing great. Defense was playing really good situationally all the way until the very end. And that's where I look at Philadelphia, and I have nothing but great stuff to say about them. Like everybody talked about it. I mean, James Bradbury admitted with as far as with that holding penalty and with that call, he was hoping that it would not be called his way. He knew exactly what that was going to look like. But in the end, you brush it off, you keep moving forward, and you keep pressing. So that's one of the things that you look at with Philadelphia, and they are very, very bought in and invested because that's what the city's all about. We know that they've got a history now to where, in those, like in that time span, all throughout the year, the Phillies lost in the World Series against the Houston Astros. We know that Philadelphia's soccer team ended up losing in the championship, and now Philadelphia, the Eagles, have lost in the Super Bowl. You can only imagine what the Sixers are going to be, but I doubt that the Sixers will make it to the finals because there are still some inconsistencies. Part of that may be coaching, part of that may be because they're lacking in some shooters, and they still need to find that balance with them. But I can tell you right now, the Eagles really are developing and they're building something really special because as long as Howie Roseman's the general manager and Jeffrey Lurie is trusting every part of his mindset and how he works as a general manager And you got Nick Sirianni, who honestly, he looks like Philadelphia. So does Jalen Hurts. So as long as they're building something special in that franchise, that is where I mean, you look at the NFC, look around you. I mean, Minnesota fell apart by the time they got in the playoffs and lost to the Giants. And you got the Packers with Aaron Rodgers. We don't even know what's going on there. But the Cowboys made it in the playoffs and they won their first game and then ended up losing against San Francisco. But even San Francisco is dealing with a quarterback issue right now because of the fact of if Brock Purdy had not been hurt and he would have been playing at least really, really good, it would have changed the narrative of the Niners. And then Cowboys, you saw exactly with what Dak is and what Dak is not. So there's limitations there. But the Cowboys know they have got to get themselves over the hump. But will they ever? I don't know. But the NFC is, as far as I can see it, it is wide open. It is wide open. And Philadelphia is taking advantage of every part of it. So I honestly had been very impressed with Philadelphia all throughout the Super Bowl. And I honestly do think that, come down the road, Philadelphia is going to get there. Philadelphia is probably going to end up winning their second Super Bowl at some point soon. We don't know when, but I think as far as the chemistry, because they just nailed themselves a lot of great key players. I mean, A.J. Brown they traded for. They got a lot of different diamonds in the rough on defense with Kaiser White. And then they ended up upgrading with Linval Joseph and with Ndamukong Suh and several players. I mean, you can't go wrong with this team. But I know the Rams might try to rebound. The Niners, I think, are going to take a slight step back, but it only depends on the development of Trey Lance and everybody else. The other part is, I think the Cowboys are going to be taking a slight step back. You might see the Packers, depending on Aaron Rodgers, they're going to be just fine. Detroit, I think, is going to end up taking a leap forward because of after how they finished. There's some positives with Jared Goff. And then Minnesota, they're going to be taking a slight step back, but let's just see what Brian Flores does as a defensive coordinator, because there may be a chance where the team actually plays better, but you still have Kirk Cousins. That is the kind of harsh reality. So there's part of that where play good, but you can only get as good as you could possibly get with Kirk Cousins. No more than that. And then everybody else, I know the NFC South is going to be weakened up because now Tom Brady is retired, and the Buccaneers, they're going to look completely different. But you got everybody else in that division with the Saints, the Panthers, and the Falcons. Falcons are obviously rebuilding. Panthers right now, I think they're looking for a playmaker. They've got a really good defense amongst them, and they've got Frank Reich as a head coach. There's some promising factors there. But everybody else, I just see the narrative. I see the narrative right in front of me with the NFC. It's wide open. And I think Philadelphia and possibly Minnesota, but several teams that may be there. But I think the Rams, it's like we talked about before. I think they honestly need to get draft picks, but they also need to get rid of Jalen Ramsey, because I think it's just about that point. You've got superstars all around. You got to make Allen Robinson work, by the way, because you signed him for a 3-year contract and he underperformed. You can't allow a situation and a scenario like that to happen again. So let it be known. That's ultimately what you would want it to do from that point forward. But I think looking into the future for the NFC, Eagles right now have a really good roster. I know that they have a ton of one-year free agents that's out there. I know that for a fact. But let's just see. But I'll tell you one thing, though, because we closed the book on a chapter in the NFL season, and we're done in Arizona. Now, a year from now, even we're past, February 11th, the Super Bowl is going to be here in my hometown in Las Vegas for Super Bowl 58. And there's nobody better that's going to be joining me, talking a little bit about that, but also talking a little more about those Vegas Golden Knights. They looked great last night, a little bit of some stuff, but they're on a 5-game winning streak. And joining me live right now, Tony Cordasco from Locked On Vegas Golden Knights. Well, let's talk a little bit about that before we go into the Golden Knights. So the Super Bowl is officially here. Now, I've been here since I was a kid. I was born here in 95, and I've seen the build of Vegas being to where it is right now, where we're on the sports market, man. And
Yeah.
and I look at the Super Bowl now, being here in Las Vegas, I can tell you, it's a party. It is something we never in years have imagined this, and now it's finally here. How do you kind of see the town really shaped for this? Because I'll be honest with you, I don't know if a ton of us are really like ultimately 110% prepared for that, but it's going to be a heck of a scene when we finally get here a year from now. What are your thoughts from that?
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Yeah, it's going to be unbelievable in this city. I just am so excited. I've been following along. I cover the Raiders on a weekly basis for CBS Sports Radio nationally, so that's fun. And I've been in Allegiant Stadium, but nothing in the history of our city is going to equal the Super Bowl when it's here. I can tell you that there are entertainment extravaganzas planned because I work with a variety of clients. My main business is consulting and event marketing. And a year or so out, like even before the holidays, we started to get jamming a lot of things that are going to be happening in this city. Unfortunately, I can't tell you about those things because I signed my life away. But I'm telling you, it will be a party like we've never seen before. And the economic impact of a Super Bowl here in Las Vegas, they're saying 600 million. I've heard reports of about anywhere 800, 900 million
Oh,
because it's just going to be an unbelievable scene here. And it kind of pales in comparison, right? Though
mm,
Formula One, within a 3 month span, we've got F1, and then we
yep.
go into the Super Bowl. Formula One, they're saying economic impact will be about $1.2 billion with a
Yeah.
B. Yeah, so they're still working like on street closures, where they're going to be putting the media. I know that our Las Vegas host committee, Super Bowl host committee, spent an entire more than a week in Arizona to
Mhm.
try to figure out more things about transportation. If we can get rid of all those cones in this city, we'll be okay. But
Yeah.
like transportation, lodging, everything, A to Z, soup to nuts. And I just think we're going to put on quite a show because no one does it like Las Vegas.
You're absolutely right about that, and it's the one city that, it never sleeps. The lights are always staying on, and they're willing to put on a show, and it is crazy too that you mentioned it with the F1 series because, it wasn't such a big thing from then until now, with the trends, and now, we're starting to get not just locally, we're even nationwide, but now we're getting international play. So that's
Yeah.
gonna make a huge difference amongst that. I mean, I think of it this way, like, I've even talked to a bunch of people who are World Series poker players and guys that are traveling internationally, and I hear these stories left and right of just like they're paying out this much up over here, and then once they come to Vegas, they're getting a massive paycheck, and it's just like the money revenue is not going to sleep. And that's where
No.
I'm very excited with what the Super Bowl is going to look like. I think after watching what Arizona and even for past Super Bowls and even too watching the Pro Bowl as what it was here. And I love it that it's here because I was always big of why did we ever move it out of Hawaii? I thought it was great. It's like a
It's great
vacation
there.
town.
It was
Yeah,
super.
it was great. And then I get it with South Florida, Miami and a lot of those places. You're still there on the beach. But even I felt like Vegas, like, hey, everybody's all like, hey, why not spend a weekend in Vegas? Like, that's where, we get a lot of that from. But I'm excited. I think it's going to turn out great. I know the committee and even all parts of it, all around in the Clark County area are going to be really, really ecstatic about this. So I'm really excited for what it'll look like a year from now for Super Bowl 58. Well, let's get into the mix of things with the Vegas Golden Knights because, man, they had a real good, tough opponent with the Tampa Bay Lightning last night. And now that's 5 in a row. And so, you know, coming into the All-Star break, things were not looking as great because, first of all, Mark Stone, his back injury, we know that was going to take a hit on their offensive line. But the other part is that Logan Thompson, I think I think he's good. He's starting to kind of come into his way, but a lot of people were concerned of it. But he's tough. He's a tough player. But I'm looking at the Golden Knights, and I've been following them. This is season 6, and I've watched in the last 5 years, Tony. This offense really has not found their identity since year one. They've been struggling at it. And it's not the coaching. The coaching I thought had been really good in the last 3 of them. And it's just that there's no consistency. They haven't found a guy who's even surpassed the 30 plus goal mark in the last few years. And so tell me your thoughts about the way you've watched these lines and with the offense. And because I kept saying, why are we not hyper aggressive? Why are we not getting to the net so quickly? Because we're playing this thing cute. We're overly passing it and we're overthinking this thing. What has been your thoughts about that with some of the offensive woes?
Yeah, really good point there because, this VGK team. So Bruce Cassidy plays a physical game. And I was concerned when he was named the head coach here only because he likes to play that gritty sandpaper type of a game, that style. And then you have VGK, which I think is way too finesse, except they really showed up and they played aggressive and they got in front of the net and they got goals uh, in front of Vasilevsky last night, which was
Yeah.
just amazing. I was really surprised at the way that they attacked. And if they're going to do that going forward, then they have a chance. They have a chance, offensively. But I think that he needs some players in there that fit his style. He's not been able to put his stamp on this team of the players that he likes to have because at times you could just see the frustration. He's just so frustrated about the way that this team was performing, the way that they, just were approaching the games. And right now, I just think that they're on a little bit of a tear. I don't know if it's one of those fool's gold tears, if they're playing in a schedule that's conducive to, the way that they came out in the second half, or if they're just improving as we go on. I guess you can say they're improving some, but now they go on the road again. And even Chicago, you have to be a little bit concerned. And there's a lot of reasons to be concerned. Aiden Hill, when does that bubble burst? Because now he's won 14 games. And it's
Yep.
so funny because Bruce Cassidy, he's been in the doghouse with Cassidy for a while. And
Mhm.
I was just surprised that even the other night when Aiden Hill had another victory, I know after the game, Cassidy was just talking about, they asked him about the goaltending of Hill, and he won't give him his props. He's just like, yeah, it's the defense in front of him. He's just been in the doghouse for some unknown reason. But look at him the last 3 games, 4 games, 5 games.
Mhm.
He had to come in for Thompson in that game that went into the shootout. I mean, just look at his performance. He's done very well. And like I go back and forth and debate with a lot of the fans. And Jack Eichel with this team, he's a superstar. 9 nights out of 10, he's the best player on the ice. When I watch him live, he's so good. But I'm in the right position to succeed. They're not
Yeah.
letting him do his thing. Offensively, they don't have the right pieces around Eichel other than Marchessault. Maybe he's going to be one of those pieces that starts to turn it on with the 2 goals and 2 goals last night. First time he scored wide in 14 games.
Yep.
And maybe perhaps Marchessault is one of those missing pieces, but he needs a player that can skate with him, catch his pass. They've all worked on him defensively. I think he's given up
Mhm.
a lot of his offensive game.
Uh-oh. Did we lose the feed? Uh-oh. Oh,
Are you still
you
there?
good there, Tony? Yeah, yeah.
There we
I
go.
was like, "Uh-oh, did we lose the feed?" Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I completely agree with you, Tony, and I've seen this, firsthand. I've been to, at least, like, 17, 18 Golden Knights games, and it's like I'm seeing almost as similarly, if not sometimes little different spurts of the narrative when it came to the offense, and especially for the front line. And, I mean, I even watched the game recently where they played the Winnipeg Jets and Aiden Hill was behind net. And I thought that was a spectacular game. Like that was a Stanley Cup playoff atmosphere when I watched it because Connor Hellebuck is just that ridiculously good with Winnipeg, and they played with a defensive identity. They were very physical. They were also the kind of team that they are aggressive when they got to score, but Vegas played great defense with behind their second goaltender in Aiden Hill. And even he made great stops. But then that was when that light sparked where I need a goal and we need to push momentum this way to where it took it to overtime and Jack Eichel went in there with the jackpot and the overtime win. I thought it was impressive. But I watched this team, and you're absolutely right. There's just guys that don't really mesh into a lot of this stuff. Now, I do have a really good colleague of mine out of Boston who told me a lot about the info about Bruce Cassidy. He is very harsh when it comes to rookies. And the reason of that is you got to get them out of their comfort zone. You got to be able to let them play in harsh situations to where they can grow, they can develop, and they can turn into potentially impactful players offensively, defensively. So I look at this and I've been saying that for a long time. Anytime that there's like a superstar, whether it's Mark Stone, whether it's somebody that's out, their offense just doesn't seem to adjust and play right, which is really concerning to me. So here we come in the trade deadline. Is there something buzzing in Vegas's headliners right now that they're starting to talk about that nobody sees right now? Because I'm hearing, Patrick Kane's name out there. I'm hearing a bunch of other things. What are you hearing right now that somewhere in between we might see Vegas potentially make a move, even if it's very riskful, but somewhere where that'll keep the momentum going?
Yeah, and something that could be dangerous. Great point. Something that could be really dangerous for this VGK team. George McPhee, he never does any interviews in Las Vegas, so I always have to tune in to a Canadian radio station when I know he's on, or Canadian podcast, because he just refuses to speak to the local media. But he was just saying, and they are playing a waiting game, which I think could be dangerous. If they were going to sign a big name free agent, I think they might have done that by now. I think that they are waiting to see what the status of Mark Stone will be, what the status of Logan Thompson is going to be. And it's so funny because I was listening to the pregame show last night, and there's a new narrative on the horizon. So Alex Petrangelo said that if the VGK team, if that squad, if the country club guys continue to play the way that they're playing, then they're going to force ownership and the front office to not make any moves. So I think the guys just got together and said, hey, we don't want to leave Las Vegas. We got things too good here. No one wants to leave. And maybe that is going to be the rallying point for the team right now. Yeah. Patrick Kane, I don't know if that's a great fit. I'm not quite sure. Goaltending, I'm still on the fence. Because I don't know. Every time that I look at the big picture, I'm like, can Aiden Hill and Logan Thompson, and to some degree, Laurent Brossoit, I call him Brossoit, can those three goalies win a Stanley Cup? And I keep battling myself and saying, no, there's no possible way that they will win a cup with those goaltenders. Great strategy last night. Bruce Cassidy, the thing, with Tampa is that they try to keep everyone on the perimeter outside. VGK counters, puts men in front. Bruce Cassidy knows the teams from the East very well, and that's what he did, and that's how they scored, and that's how they won that game last night. But he continues to struggle with the Pacific Division. I think 7-7-2, as of now, against the Pacific, which is a very weak division. And so they're going to have to win those games within the division. But back to your question, I'm not sure if they're going to make any moves. I'm really not certain at this point. I thought that they were in the market for a goaltender. They do need a premier playoff tested goalie, okay, if you will, because the defense is really bailing out a lot. Aiden Hill, Logan Thompson, and we'll probably see Brossoit probably this week in Chicago. But that's the one piece. And then if they could get a winger to work with Eichel on that top line, that's speedy, that can play, his pace, and that he meshes with, that's a good word that you used earlier, then I think that they'll be okay.
Yeah, and I'm curious of your thought on this because, I look at this and like, here's what's funny about it. I mean, the NHL has been trending in such a different way now because of like where it's shifting at. And I mean, we watched this in 2019 with Jordan Binnington be as great as he was in the
Mm.
playoffs to where the Blues got their first ever Stanley Cup. And you're watching a lot of these young guys. Some of these guys, and we're very notorious of it. That's why we're called the Golden Misfits for a reason. But, we watch a lot of these diamond in the rough kind of guys where it may not have worked in one club, but it's certainly working in the other. And then, you get a lot of these moves around. So the Golden Knights, what I was really concerned of, because I will say this at best, I thought the first year felt like a fluke to me because we were winning we were winning for a reason because number one, obviously the October 1st massacre, but also the fans, the atmosphere, they were all behind the team. Now we're already years past that and we're trying to find that identity because I can tell you right now, a lot of teams, I already know their identity. Dallas Stars, defensive identity. They're great with Pete DeBoer. Winnipeg, physical, defensive, and they're in your face. Their identity. Boston, they play hard. And it's like, I look at Vegas and I'm like, I don't know what their identity is.
Me
And
neither.
that's where it's like it gets so confusing because I thought at one year, okay, they're a hyper aggressive team. That's what they want to be. They want to be in those games, but then at times it's like they have a tendency to pull back and then they play a little cute. Um, but these trades away, Cody Glass, Dylan Coughlin, um, Nick Suzuki. I watched a lot of these young kids get traded away. And I'm like, they're playing a lot of these guys like I said, I don't think Patrick Kane would work in this either because I know he's kind of getting up there in age. And so there's only so much time you could use with Patrick Kane. But at some point, you got to start thinking about your future if you're Vegas. Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see in a lot of these trade deals that teams are giving up first round picks. VGK, no first rounders. Okay. They have no
Mhm.
assets really that they can give up, that they could part with. Another issue is I'm concerned about the lack of development of the talent in the AHL and in the minor leagues for this team. And you're
Yeah.
absolutely right. They don't have an identity. We're still trying to figure out, like every day on our Locked On Golden Knights, podcast, we talk about this, that we still don't feel like they have an identity. What could it be? I say finesse. I say country club. I don't know. But again, I just think there's a bunch of spoiled kids, on the ice for VGK. I will say that, some of the players have really stood out in the absence of Mark Stone. And I hate to lean on Stone and use that as a crutch and he's out and he's injured. But the one area where I feel that they're really missing him is on the power play unit because he plays that bumper spot
Yes.
and he's
Yep.
so strong in front of the net. And that's the one area that they really, really are missing him. And then the leadership role. I don't know who's leading this team, but it seems as though Petrangelo might have just said, hey, if you guys don't get this together, we're all going to be traded and we're going to be playing somewhere else. And he failed on recruiting Ryan O'Reilly to come here. And so I think he's a little bit upset about that. But maybe they're starting to gel. We've seen this act before. Win streaks, losing streaks. I mean, just back and forth. And it's kind of a schizo team. And they'll lose some night, like Chicago. That game scares you.
Mhm.
Even though they're not very good, like every game has to scare you. And the one thing that San Jose did that I thought other teams are going to start to replicate again, just build that wall at the blue line and they can't
Yeah.
enter the zone. And again, they couldn't score. Are we going to go through those droughts again where they can't score goals? I mean, they had 5. The one was an empty netter and the eventual game winner. But are they going to be able to sustain scoring goals? And I'm not sure about that because they go through these, as Cassidy calls them, funks, right? They can't score goals at times.
Yeah,
And I'm
it's
very
true.
concerned about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, and I know for a fact, I mean, like, because I've said this and I preached it out many, many times. I even said this to like 2 years ago. I said this on the radio to JT the Brick, where I'm like, January, February, and March are the harshest months that you have to play at your best because that's what makes you battle tested for the NHL playoffs. Because if you're not getting any types of momentum and you're kind of playing like, you're winning 50% of those games, the last thing you want to do is lose less than 50% because
Right.
then you're going to be a team that's going to be eliminated at the first round. And
Yeah.
if you're not playing to the exact strengths, like I'll give you an example. Like Colorado is a very hyper speedy, aggressive team that Nathan McKinnon, if he's got the puck in like with him, he's dangerous. And then you've got, like I mentioned, Dallas. Dallas plays with a defensive mindset. They trust their goaltender, but they trust their defense. Miro Heiskanen, the young kid, and they know how to stop the puck when they need to, and they slow guys down. But Tampa, like I've said before, even 2 years ago, they were very speedy, very aggressive. They trusted every part of their unit, and they knew where to really attack opposing teams. And that's where I think last night was a great grind out. And I'm surprised at the fact that they even made it through that group. But 5-game winning streak, I'm happy of it. But like you, I still have some concerns of it. But at least they're riding this train through. Um, when I look at a lot of teams around in the NHL and looking into the NHL playoffs, because I think the Rangers hit a home run with Vladimir Tarasenko. They've got a
I'm a
lot of
Ranger fan. I
unit.
agree. I concur.
Yeah, they've got a lot of offensive guys. And former Golden Knights coach Gerard Gallant, who's also hyper aggressive. We saw this when he was a player in Detroit, and he's a guy that loves offense. We watched not to, now Ryan O'Reilly to Toronto. Toronto, I know, has to get past that first round funk because they never seem to get out of it. But hopefully this could get the leap. When you look at a lot of teams in the NHL, what stands out to you as when you look at a team, you're kind of analyzing in perspective of this team's going to give you fits in the playoffs? Are there some teams you're looking at from the outside looking in that could potentially give other team fits?
Yeah. So, I mean, we could start at the Pacific Division with the VGK, and I'm not sure that they are prepared to play a team from the Pacific in the playoffs. Bruce Cassidy, again, not familiar with the Pacific Division, and that concerns me. Seattle at times, I mean, that's a team that I think matchup wise, I think that they could give VGK fits. Edmonton, anytime you have, elite scoring abilities. I'm still surprised that Calgary hasn't really made that push yet. And VGK, I think, plays them three more times this season, and those could be deciding factors. And the final games of the season, regular season, home and home with Seattle for the Vegas Golden Knights. So that could
Yeah.
be something to look out for. Boston in the East, they're just beasts. I mean, they are the beast from the East. I don't see anyone beating them right now. I just don't know because they play well defensively. They're sticky, great goaltending, great coaching. They took a lot of what Cassidy left and they added to that and improved on that. I think the winner comes out of the East. I just think it's much stronger. Colorado, they'll have another push. They're going to have a major push now. And I know that Jared Bednar was upset talking about back-to-back games the other day and how much he's just whining a little bit. But his team will get right. And I think they'll be back in the mix. I can't count out Colorado from the West and then Boston perhaps from the East. But there's a lot of hockey left to play, as we know. And then, you just hope that these teams stay healthy for it. But VGK, I mean, they don't have any assets to really part with. And a lot of teams want number ones. They want a prospect and they want a current player. And then the other thing to look out for too is that a lot of teams I feel don't want to deal with VGK, because they were the cocky new kids. And like they came into the league now, they're like kind of brash and cocky and all that. And so I think a lot of teams are just going, yeah, right, we're going to help this team to win. They're already like the golden child of the NHL. I think the NHL wants them to win. They bring ratings, excitement, and so much more. I think they want them in the playoffs. But I think that VGK, I think that I'm still not sure that they're going to be a playoff team. I'm still not sure that they will even make it into the playoffs.
So, and just a thought before we wrap things up is because, and I've said this too, last year they didn't make the playoffs. I said that's going to probably spark a fire to Kelly McCrimmon because of the fact of you can't afford to let this team miss the playoffs, especially when you have the inconsistency and you've got star power in some places. But we're here again. Some of the kids are shining. Even the guys that have been longtime players here with William Carlson, Jonathan Marchessault, and and a couple others. Um, oh, we're gonna try to retrieve the feedback real quick. Here, let me go ahead and pull this down for a little bit. But he does. But Tony does make great points. I mean, this is what I've said before. This is all about a lot of the identity. If you're not searching for that identity, and you don't have that, especially in late in the season when you really need momentum, that becomes very disastrous for teams, and they fall apart. I mean, we watched this with Tampa Bay at one point. We watched this where we had against Columbus. They got upset in the first round against Columbus, and they were the President's Trophy winners. They were the team that was favored to win the Stanley Cup, and they were very hyper aggressive. That's why I'm like, anything could possibly happen when you're in the NHL playoffs, but it ultimately comes down to what is your momentum like? Who's on your roster? And ultimately, are you winning those situational battles? Because you got to win those faceoffs. Got to end up, breaking the planes where you're on the offense and you really got to score those goals. That was always my problem when it came to the Golden Knights, is because their offense at times started to play cute. They didn't exactly, get the right. They didn't get the right feel for what they were, for what they were potentially trying to find. They were not quite there. Um, Hold on, we'll see if we can get him back up on the feed again. Yeah, let's see if I can get him back on. So once we get the feedback with Tony Cordasco, because it really is good talking with a great guy all around here in the Vegas Valley, and very has a lot of connections with great media people, and being around in Allegiant Stadium and in T-Mobile Arena. So, um, but yeah, I'm truly on the side where I'm with him. Same same concern. I don't know if in fact the Golden Knights really do have that kind of momentum going into the Stanley Cup playoffs. If they do make it that way, I mean, they're on a 5-game tear, but sometimes the narrative can change by then, because by April, May, and by the time that we're up in June, Stanley Cup playoffs, it gets hardened. It's a tough, hardened test to where they really have to play their best. So I'm excited for it. And I really do hope that, at least, I really do hope my hometown, they really do. They really, really do make it into the playoffs. They play better at it. And I do think that at some point, because they have to make it work. There's no there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. They have to be able to make it work to the point where they can play offensively and defensively. And they've got real good assets, but they don't have enough of it. Like he mentioned, was there's not any draft capital that the team has. So a lot of teams are looking for first round, second round draft picks. Vegas, unfortunately, does not have a lot of those assets. They don't have a lot of that draft capital. That's where the trade deadline makes it really, really hard. But, and I was going to ask him, was, would this be a time if the Golden Knights miss the playoffs again? Could Kelly McCrimmon be fired? That's where I'm a little concerned with that, because I truly do think there have been conversations, and there have been there's been outlooks with, as far as the way the general managing really has worked, and the way that it really has put itself together. So, all right, we got the feedback with Tony. I'm gonna make sure everything's all good. All right, you can hear me, Tony?
I got you again. Sorry about that.
No worries. So I was gonna ask is because the team right now, we know that they're on a tear, and they put themselves together a really good winning streak. But Last year, they missed the playoffs. The team could not afford to miss the playoffs because of the fact of the money, the draft capital, all the rest of it was really against Vegas at that point. So, if in fact, and hypothetically speaking, if this team misses the playoffs, could this really be a point where we really, really have to reconsider with Kelly McCrimmon as the general manager?
Oh yeah, and he's hitched his wagon too to Jack Eichel. And as Eichel goes, I think so does Kelly McCrimmon's longevity with the VGK. And
Yeah.
I think everything's going to point to him. And I'm surprised. I thought for a while there in season that they would pull the trigger and Bill Foley would say enough is enough, especially when they started to lose games towards the end of the right prior to the All-Star break. I was really concerned that they were going to do something and make some moves. And McPhee and McCrimmon, great friends, have breakfast together every day. We found this out, of course, on Canadian radio. And they hang out a lot, talk about moves, maneuvers, whatever. They've only been, I think, to one or two, as much as I could tell, with sightings, Henderson Silver Knights games. And I just found that a little bit peculiar because it's right down the street. And then Bruce Cassidy himself was like, well, I just use the recommendations of Manny Viveros when I need a player to call up. And so they're not really that in tune, with the minor league system, I don't believe. And that could come back to bite them. And then just, some of the moves they've made, again, future considerations. It's the big joke, right? Like, they're not going to be making many more deals for future considerations because now they're going to need considerations because they're going to
Oh,
need some
yeah.
players. I still think, there might be a move in store, a move or two. There's still some players left on the free agent market. But again, I think for them to make deals, especially with the salary cap being the way that it is, they need a partner. They need a third team to jump in there. And right now, no one's responding. Oh, Timo Meyer's the best one, right? Everyone's Timo Meyer. He'll be a great Golden Knight. Well, is San Jose really going to trade with the Nemesis and VGK? I don't think so. I don't think so at all.
Yeah, and think about it this way. I mean, the fact that they got Aiden Hill from San Jose and they were able to get him to a point where he's become a very, very serviceable and promising goaltender as well along the way. And yeah, I mean, any of them that are in division, I doubt they want to trade to anybody that's in that division as well because they're already at top. But here's what was crazy about this, and I always evaluated this the more I watched this team. I felt like the team should have moved off Max Pacioretty earlier because his value was good enough. You can get draft capital. You could get a player in return because he was playing so damn good. He was playing with fire. But we also know that there are times kind of shrinks in the playoffs. So I'm like, look, I need somebody that's going to show up in the playoffs. I can't just have somebody that's great in the regular season and then he disappears because I mean, good God, we watch this all the time, but we know he's young. But we watch Mitch Marner at times where he's real good in regular season and he disappears with Toronto. But
Right.
you can't afford to have that kind of asset there. So I felt if they had traded him away earlier, got draft capital, got some guys, there would have been some promising hopes. And I've said this: if they made those moves, I mean, we just saw Matt Hoffman take a 1-year deal with St. Louis, who's a 30-plus goal scorer.
Right.
And it didn't even seem like it was that much. So I'm
Mhm.
like, little gems like that, where I'm like, are they even paying attention to some of this stuff? Because I'm like, that's where I'm like, you got to have somebody that can really boost the offense, get them going. Because each time they crash at the net, they want to pull back. And that's where I'm like, no, you have to go at it in full force. You ain't doing that if you're Colorado. You ain't doing that if you're Tampa. And so that's where I'm like, those moves all before. And we thought, Dylan Coughlin would have been a promising guy because he's very fierce when it comes to the long shot. And he's got he's got great range. Now, I know Cody Glass was a little questionable because of the fact of the injuries. I get it. Kind of small, has to kind of, get battle tested, but he still looks like it could be something good in Nashville. But then you watch the combination between Nick Suzuki and Cole Caulfield. And so you're really looking at that of like, are we sure Kelly's doing the right thing? That's
Right.
where I ultimately was like, I don't know if that's going to be something because at some point you got to relook at that front office. You got to look at that scouting department because if they're not looking at the right guys they should be, especially when it comes to draft picks, when it comes to developing players in the minor leagues. I mean, I watch baseball all the time. I watch hidden gems all over. That's why the Dodgers, the Braves, so many of them are so damn talented because of that front office.
Mhm.
So that's going to be something to really heavily consider at that
You're
point.
right. Yeah, you're absolutely right there because, I mean, they kind of like talk so much about Chandler Stevenson and what a find he was. Okay, outside of that, who are these finds, that they come up with? It was an interesting story, though. McPhee said because he got fired shortly after Stevenson, was a player that they brought in Washington, fourth liner, right? And
Yep.
then McPhee gets fired, and he goes, I saw him in one preseason game where I said this kid's got some spark and he's tough and he's gritty and then that's why they brought him in here. That's
Mhm.
why they signed him in Las Vegas, which was pretty interesting. But yeah, they haven't come up with a ton of these gems. And another thing too is what's going to come back to haunt this team, these long-term contracts. We did an entire
Yep.
show on these contracts, and William Carlson through 27 is an absolute joke. I mean,
Mhm.
these are jokes. Some of them, they just got away. I mean, one season wonders, and like a lot of these players, they're not going to live out their contracts. They're
Yep.
just getting up there in age. You could see with Mark Stone, you could tell that he was breaking down. I don't think he was 100% at the start of this season at all. I
Yeah.
think he was injured from the jump. I
Mhm.
think he came back too soon. And then right there before the holidays, we were like, Chris Golick, who does Lockdown Golden Knights with me, and he
Mhm.
goes to just about every game. He was like, I was like, I'm watching him on TV and I'm observing, what I see, and he doesn't look right. And he's like, yeah, at times he's just laboring to go up and down the ice. He was
Mhm.
breaking down. Maybe, I don't know, maybe overcompensating the one area of the back, made him hurt the other side, or something. But it compounded things, and yeah, but you could see that breaking down. Another observation, right? Logan Thompson,
Mhm.
LT. He was playing too many games. He's never played this many games. Okay,
Yep.
uh, and now he is considered a rookie, correct?
Mhm.
And so you have Thompson. I thought they were taxing him. Cassidy, come hell or high water, likes to play the hot hand. And that's why we
Yep.
didn't see Brassois net against Tampa. And I thought, that they overused Logan Thompson, mostly
Yeah.
primarily because I still don't think that Cassidy trusts. That's a good word to use. I think trust Aiden Hill in that. But you could see where he was starting to wear down. And I said he needs a break after the All-Star break because now he's still playing more games. He needed that break. I think the break helped out this team overall. I think Jack Eichel got healthy. I think a lot of players came back with some zip. And then
Mhm.
again, they sort of formed this union, if you will, of players now that are they're just going to band together so no one has to leave Las Vegas, which is kind of funny. But yeah, that's it.
Yeah. I mean, it is crazy. And yes, I agree with you, especially with the long-term contracts, because I think they just got way too gung-ho. I think they really just like, especially with because I look at Carlson, I even look at Shea Theodore at times. And I'm like, because Theodore, I know, can play to his best extent, but there have even been times where he's even made whiffs. And I'm like, that's not something he would do. Because
Mhm.
looking at that whole defensive front with Braden McNabb and Alec Martinez and with Alex Petrangelo, there's no way. But we know that when it comes to the chemistry of the team, when someone breaks down, God knows who else is going to end up breaking down in the middle of all of that. So, and it is kind of funny they mentioned that with Mark Stone because he hasn't gotten to the point where, like, as 110% healthy, like he was when he was first acquired in 2019. That's where I'm like,
Mhm.
that's where a spark of that concern really does kind of come around. But there has to be more rejuvenation in that offense. There's got to be more guys that, like, I've always been the next man up type mentality
Right.
and that's where a lot of those young kids, I would have thought during this whole process was going to step in, get their times in, and really show themselves what they're really made of. Like make the cut on this line, and then that's where you're starting to see this unravel. They're good for now, but when you're in those stretches, and I said this too, April, May, and then right toward the start of June, Stanley Cup playoffs, it doesn't get better than that. It
Mm.
becomes battle tested and hardened for a
Yeah.
reason. So
Yeah.
that's where they really, really got to start to pick those things up. But I thought Logan Thompson does a great job. I know it's one of his biggest tests. But another thing I want to point is because we've seen tandems with the Golden Knights before. I mean, the Marc-Andre Fleury and, the Robin Leonard tandem we thought was magnificent. And right now, because we're seeing Logan Thompson and Aiden Hill, what is the question mark now on Robin Leonard? Because I've been around Vegas fan bases. They're all writing him off. I've said, well, timeout, timeout. If you're getting somebody who's been in the playoffs, who's got experience in the playoffs, and somebody that we know a little bit oversized, but we also know I'm not expecting him to be a Flurry. I'm expecting him to be a goaltender and just make the stops, be a force behind net, be that kind that's going to give your team the momentum. So, what's the question mark status right now on Robin Leonard, even watching these goaltenders really play to that extent?
Okay, so he really broke down though, and he lied about all these injuries.
Yep.
Frank Saravelli, all those reports said, no, I'm not injured. And so he has shoulder surgery, not just one hip surgery, but two, which that's going to, be something that can keep him out of playing hockey, period. Maybe his career is over. I'm concerned about that. Of course, the snake farming and all that.
Mhm.
I'm not. I don't think I think done even in Las Vegas, if that's a sign. I mean, he's
Yeah.
just rehabbing in Sweden and I don't know, making bad business deals stuff. But yeah, I don't think I personally don't believe he'll be back. I don't know what they have to do to buy him out of his contract, put him on LTIR long term, what have you. And yeah, I don't buy that he'll be back. Also furthermore, Bill Foley had said at one point this season, he said, "Oh, it's kind of nice now. We don't have, you goalie."
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah, no, yeah, and I think it is an interesting point, and that's crazy though. With hearing that of Robin Leonard, and now it kind of really brings a lot of clarity up onto the team. But I think towards the off season, because if nothing's being done by the trade deadline itself, which I think you and I kind of anticipate there won't be, but if there's not something that is made that is crucial to move this team in the right direction come the off season, that's where I kinda am like, I don't think I'd really do trust Kelly McCrimmon in this position, because you
Mm-mm.
gotta have somebody that's willing to take the risk. The ones that are really, smart. We know Vegas is a big town. There's a lot of high expectations. They're on the map now, but you gotta work the financials, you gotta work the draft capital in order for it to work your way.
Mm.
But hopefully there's gonna be some positive ends for the Golden Knights. It's a great winning streak they got going on now, but, hopefully we'll really start to find the other side of them and at some point see some type of identity when we come to that crossroad. So
Yeah.
I see you're repping the Vegas Vipers hat because, of course, too, the XFL is officially back. Your quick thought of what you looked at now with spring football being up in there, because we close a chapter in the NFL. Now the XFL and the USFL are going to be starting up. Your thoughts on the spring football kickoff?
I'll tell you what, I was really surprised in a good way in watching the XFL game, and even though our hometown Vipers lost, I still was excited to watch them play. I think Hundley will be the starting quarterback next week, and I think that they're going to show a little bit more explosiveness in that regard. And I thought that the television coverage was really good and unique because they could go up to the players and ask them questions, right after they score a touchdown. Why did you call that play on the sidelines? You could hear the plays as they're being sent in. And then they're very descriptive about that. I thought that was a facet of the game that I really enjoyed. And I was a fan of the first XFL game here in Las
Yep.
Vegas. And so
Yep.
I was the reporter at that time for ESPN. And I said to Bob Valvano, this league is here to stay. And then, of course, they didn't even last the season. And then, of course, we had the XFL times 2. That came out in 21, and that was a failure. So I don't know. You want to support these teams. I don't think they're in the right venue. A lot of fans are skeptical about going downtown, even though they are daytime games. I mean, got to call facts, right?
Yep.
And I just think, it's going to hurt their attendance down there, but it's an intimate setting. And I might go check out a game. I might, but I like the TV coverage the most, really. And I like football anyway. So USFL, I wasn't so keen on last season. XFL maybe has more of a chance.
Yeah, I think I think it's going to be really, really good. I mean, yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, seeing that with the old Las Vegas Outlaws, and when you had He Hate Me as far as
Loved
big
it.
as the
Loved it.
headliners were, yep. Oh, it was great.
Loved
I
it.
think it's great to see it revived again, and for Dwayne the Rock Johnson really bringing together a great team to really make this happen. I think it's great for quality television, and you're right about that. I've heard a lot of people really give great props to what you mentioned with on-field coverage, but at the same time, they looked at a lot of the officiating. I feel like
Great
because
point.
that's getting influenced a lot because I know we watched the Super Bowl and a crucial call, but I've said it before, it still doesn't account for the fact that there were 2 blown coverages in the red zone. You still gotta account for stuff like that. But I think as far as getting better at officiating, because we know these officials are human, we know they're gonna make mistakes, but to seeing all ends of the field, really evaluating each and every single play and replay, but also too, nice to get that up close exposure to where why play the call? What did you see? What was the kind of thing? I love that. And even for doing this show and doing interviews, I love to be in the mind of the person. Like, what else are they seeing that I'm not seeing that they could really put together? So,
You know what I appreciated. Sorry to cut you off though, but so
Mhm,
last night they had that replay in the VGK game with
mhm,
the alleged high stick, of Marchessault on his second goal,
yep.
and that replay took an eternity. USFL, I mean, sorry, XFL. Did I just say USFL? The
Yeah.
XFL was so good in just being just so quick. So they show the replay booth. Okay, he doesn't. Okay, does he have control of the football there? No. Yes. Okay. Wait. Okay. Done. Yeah, we're going to call that a catch. Okay, it's a catch, and it shouldn't take that long. For the
Yeah.
most part, some of them you do have to replay a lot back and forth, and they did have to replay that stick, which I thought they had one angle. I was watching the game last night on the Tampa feed, and they did have one angle where the stick was up, over the crossbar. But most of the other ones, you couldn't really tell. There was no determination. But in the XFL, I just like how speedy their replays are. And it's just like, okay, we're going to get down to business. There's one guy in there. Okay, does he have control or his feet down? Okay, there, slow it down. Great. You're watching it as it transpires, and then they just make the call. It's super. They should do that in every sport. Give them 30 seconds max. And if you
Mhm.
can't make a determination, then you can't. That's it.
Oh, I agree. And I hope that like the officiating, they get to the same similar speed. I mean, I'm glad that Major League Baseball has gotten on this train because it
Mhm.
really has helped with close calls with
Right.
as far as slides into second, even crucial collisions at the plate. They've upped on the safety, but they've also gotten to the point of where's that angle? That's what we need to find because that's going to be the huge determining factor of how they manage the game afterward. I think it's been absolutely keen. I do love these replays. I do think there are some small adjustments because I know a lot of people are like, we need robotic umpires for strike zones. We need we need those close calls in those corners of the end zones that were just like, is he 2 feet in bounds? Does he have control of that ball? Like, and I've even played the sport and I know how the speed really goes. You got to be consistent with it. Even in hockey, you got to be consistent with where the puck is, where exactly is his direction. And not to mention, too, is there other activity happening on the outside that people are not seeing? So
Mhm.
I think it's technology's really evolved and they've really moved into this cycle now to where it's really becoming very crucial for every single game. And they want to make it to where it's a great game all the way around. So I think it'll be great. I think it's going to be the part of the future of it. But I also do love the fact of just the atmosphere of the game and the energy, just the vibe itself. So but I'm excited for it. But I appreciate you coming on here this morning, Tony. Thank you so much for taking your time. Where can people find you with everything Golden Knights and maybe so much more too?
Who knows? I have an opinion, obviously, on everything. At Tony Dasco, at Tony Dasco on Twitter, at Lockdown VGK, myself and Chris Golick do Lockdown Golden Knights, and that is 5 days a week. We're up literally, and we do that show. We'll record it at like 6:30 in the morning. I wish we could go to like 8, but whatever. So no, so we have a lot of fun with that, and we have our updates each and every day. And yeah, Lockdown VGK, and of course at Tony Dasco on Twitter, best way, and DM me and whatever. Yeah, I just have fun. It's I've covered sports in the city for a long time. I just have a blast doing it. Sometimes it's a little bit of a critical eye. The fans don't like that, but I'm just trying to be honest and transparent with fans.
Yep.
And sometimes we see things that others might not see. Like
Yep.
VGK had too many men on the ice last night. Okay, they didn't, of course, get penalized. These refs, man, this league is so rigged. I got to tell you,
Yeah.
man.
Oh God, I know.
Bill Foley puts them up where the Four Seasons, 5-star diamond dinners, and all that. And yeah, of course they're going to take care of VGK. Of course.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, hell, if I've got somebody give me, 5-star restaurants, whether it's, whether it's right there near like the D Las Vegas at that
Mhm.
restaurant, that steakhouse, or even a couple other places, I'd be willing to be sold on it too.
Yeah. I'm sold.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
all fixed. Thank
But
you
I will
so
tell you,
much.
yeah, I will tell you as a side note, because like for me, I've been doing this for about 3 years, and it
Awesome.
is an absolute dream of mine to at some point be on the radio, be on television broadcasting, and being here in Vegas, it is tough. It's hard to play with a lot of these dogs and these cats coming up, but quality content, balanced and unbiased opinions, and at the same time I'm seeing that others aren't, and clarifying, and even having building these relationships too, not only just with great writers, content creators, but even for former current athletes and coaches, like what was their mentality going into it, and then what are they doing now beyond sports when in their life, like a lot of them I've spoken to, they've got different businesses, they've got different sponsorships, and it's like it's great to see it because it's like you see them from the beginning where they are now, and then you have no choice but to drink all that in. And so like to
Mhm.
me, it's a dream of mine to be into it, and at some point going back to school, getting the certs and such. And so that's why it was great talking with you, because I'm like, wow, I got somebody in my hometown who's
Mhm.
seen it, who's done it, who's been in that realm, and just to getting that experience and to seeing that always really does help, especially when it's mastering my craft and getting better at it, to where you'll never know when more windows of opportunity may open up.
Yeah, I think you're better on the podcast side because radio right now is just going downhill.
Yeah.
Terrestrial radio is just not where it's at. They're again, I could just speak to our own market while we have a second here, but like they'll do shows that are syndicated rather than doing local sports talk, and to me, or music actually
Mhm.
too. Now they do syndication, and I guess you could blame that on the pandemic a lot because
Mhm.
people were at home. And then, I just did my first Saturday morning radio show in the
Mm.
studio in 3 years yesterday. In
Oh,
three
wow.
years, so I usually have my feet up on the furniture here. They said you can't do that at the station, so unfortunately I couldn't do that. But yeah, first time in 3 years because of the pandemic. So hopefully we're getting back to that, and hopefully radio rebounds because it is a great medium. I've been in radio my whole life. Just I've had so much fun. It's so entertaining to me, and if it's calling a game, broadcasting a UNLV Rebel game, if it's just doing sports talk or what have you, it's the best medium, and I don't have to dress up. Okay, I like
Mhm.
that part too, so I could wear my
Yeah,
hat.
I like that. I like the authentication, and I also like it to where it's like you are like you're very authentic with your brand, how you sell. Like, hey,
Right.
this is what I'm bringing to the table, and this is how I want it set. And can you make that happen? Like, I like that because I'm telling you, if I get somebody that's basically like, well, you're great, no, but if you look at this teleprompter, I'd be shutting the door and I'll be like, no, I'm not doing the teleprompter because it's like,
No.
it's like it doesn't give you the real thing. And so, yeah, and I love the medium of it because think about it, we've been in a generation where that's all we relied on was radio. That's how we got our coverages. So
Yeah.
it's like even being in that and having a healthy medium to where not only just doing the podcasting, even up on the radios and even in television itself, you've got a platform where your voice is out everywhere. And then you're just like, you're making that to where people are listening and tuning in. That's the kind of thing that, like I really am excited for. And that's what I push and strive for as well, just to be
Awesome.
on all those parts. So, but great talking with you, Tony. Really appreciate you. Have
Excellent.
a great day and a great
Thank you.
weekend. We know we got President's Day weekend, and I'm
Yeah.
hearing too. Our
I
Lady
don't like
Rebels
that.
are really
I don't like when we have an extra day off in this city because people turn it into a 6-day weekend. Like it's
Yep.
ridiculous. If you're in
Oh, I know
business
it.
here, it's horrible, man. It's like I hate holidays now. Sorry.
No, I hear you up on that. I know that feeling because for me, I got the day off and I'm like, I got to do something like right now, But
Lady
I'm
Rebels are on
hearing
fire. Yes, Lady
they
Rebels.
are. They are. So I'm pulling for them to be really, really good because March Madness right around the
Oh
corner. I
man.
love that time of year. I get excited because that's my birthday month. So every time I watch March Madness, there's always a story that's just fantastic to watch. But I hope NBA gets on the point like the NFL where they're respecting college hoops. You watch these stories, you watch these kids, and they groom them up well. That's all I look for.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm
Yeah.
looking forward to March Madness and Lady Rebels. Hope they don't get screwed if they don't win the tournament, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Come at large. Question.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Uh,
everything's all up on the line for
Now
our
that
Lady
they're
Rebels.
out, can they continue to win? Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah,
Oh, yeah. But thank you so much, Tony. Appreciate your
yeah.
time.
Well, I
Take
think we're
care.
breaking up again.
Yeah,
Thank you. Appreciate
absolutely.
you.
Mhm.
All righty.
Take
Thanks.
care of
Thanks for
yourself.
having me.
Mhm. Yeah, Tony Cordasco. That was a great conversation. I absolutely loved it. And the fact that, yeah, there is just the Golden Knights really have to find that identity. But it is hard because the fact that there is not a draft capital that is behind them. So that's where it really does make it harder. Um, but I think once they come to that threshold, once they kind of come to that crossroad, they really have to make some serious moves. But I do agree. I think they've been gung ho when it comes to long term contracts for certain players. I'm not really a fan of it. I do think that you have to evaluate it as best as possible. So I feel like the front office, the scouting department, the recruiting, like they've really got to get better at it. And I think that when they start to go into that trend, when they start to go into that motion and in that movement, that is where they really, really have to figure that out. So I truly think that they're riding this streak, they're riding this wave right now. But they have to come to that serious conclusion and that um and they have to come to that serious I get not well, they got to come to that serious fact that this is what really has to happen. So I think you're going to see some serious moves. If they don't end up making the moves, that's where I got to get Kelly McCrimmon out. Like that. That's just ultimately what I would feel like for the Golden Knights. You got to have somebody that's competent as a general manager. So there's no excuses for it. You got to make the moves. I think if he doesn't, Kelly McCrimmon will be out of the job. So that's what I honestly feel for it. I do want to make a side note because Derek Carr had been officially released by the Las Vegas Raiders, so no longer like a real burden to this team. They're saving 40 million on the cap for it. I know that that's kind of crucial for them, but here's the other thing. Wherever Derek Carr is going to go, I know why he didn't want to do a trade because ultimately, um, I mean, you watch what how they treated him. You watch by how the team really did evaluate a lot of his skill set. I think it's kind of ridiculous. And the Raiders didn't really treat it the best way possible. So I think going into a better place, I think Carolina would be a great spot. They've got some promising factors there. The defense is getting better. I also do think that the New York Jets would be a really good spot because I think Robert Saleh, he has been a part of that. Um, Being in San Francisco, when it comes to the quarterbacks, I think Derek Carr would thrive there, but they'd have to really finagle some type of deal. But that is the hard part. The the Raiders, they're not getting draft picks. They are not getting, some type of incentive. Now, they may be getting a compensatory pick. They might get that, but that's as far as they can go. So, I think it'll be interesting. I'm going to be excited to see where Derek Carr really ends up in the best way possible because I feel like anywhere on those schedules they face the Raiders, I guarantee you there's going to be payback coming for them. So, that's kind of where I am with Derek Carr. I think he's going to thrive somewhere else, and I think it'll be a better opportunity for him, in my opinion. So, all righty, folks, that's going to do it here for us at the Snake Sports Talk Show. Shout out to Tony Cordasco of Locked On BGK. Always great talking with great content creator guys, and of course, some of the best writers in the biz. If you haven't done so already, like, subscribe, hit the bell button for all latest notifications to keep you up to date on future and past shows of the Snake Sports Talk Show all over. We're all over the map here in the 702, so that's where you can find me. We're on the road to 1,000 subscribers on YouTube and many, many more media. So let's get ourselves up over the hump. Appreciate your guys' support and love for the show. Great stuff. I got to tune out because we've got President's Day weekend. Nothing like it. Extra day off. Well, I'm excited about it. But take care of yourselves. Have a great President's Day weekend, and we will see you on the next episode of the Snake Sports Talk Show. Take care of yourselves and have a good week.